So, a 2-year-old girl born from an illegal who broke and entered into the country was deported alongside with her illegal mother. And the media, naturally, is melting down over this, claiming that a 2-year-old citizen who didn't have a parent that was a citizen was being deported with her non-citizen mother. Imagine that. These guys, these mainstream media buffoons, are so desperate to create a narrative that American citizens are at risk for deportation that they are trying to scare people into thinking, why, maybe even a 2-year-old child could one day be sent to an El Salvador super prison, as if that would ever actually happen. It's nothing more than propaganda from the mainstream media. It is a narrative that they are desperately trying to gin up to shore up the idea that just because someone slips into the country, illegal alien style, to drop a baby here, that somehow that should mean that their children become U.S. citizens, which of course is ludicrous. It's stupid. And yet, since 1982, when the courts decided that the 14th Amendment, designed to protect former slaves, should now apply to criminals who break and enter into our country, America has been held captive to the tyranny of the illegal. However, public sentiment has now changed. People want these illegal aliens gone, deported, with or without their families. Get them out of here. And that is what the battle is really all about. It is the desperate attempt to change your mind on whether these poor illegals should be deported or not. Well, this is an article from NBC News, the left-wing news rag. They title their article on the story reading, 2-year-old U.S. citizen apparently deported with no meaningful process, a judge says. The child's mother was being deported and wanted to take the girl, U.S. lawyers said. When the judge asked to speak to her, they were already in the air. Whoops. This is written by Phil Hessel and Joe Kotke, or Kotke, yeah. A federal judge in Louisiana on Friday said that a 2-year-old U.S. citizen appears to have been deported with her mother to Honduras because she was an illegal and her child belonged with her, with no meaningful due process. In an order scheduling a hearing for next month, U.S. District Judge Terry Doughty wrote that the child was sent to Honduras on Friday with a mother who had been ordered to be removed. Doughty wrote, the government contends that this is all okay because the mother wishes that the child be deported with her. Okay, but the court doesn't know that. Oh, so sad, Mr. Judge Man. The Louisiana court called a government lawyer at 12:19 p.m. local time to speak with the child's mother while the plane was in the air and was called back at 1:06 p.m. and told that the mother and child were already in Honduras. Judge Doughty wrote that the May 16th hearing was in the interest of dispelling our strong suspicion that the government just deported a U.S. citizen with no meaningful process. It's not a citizen. That is what's really at stake here. That's what the fight is all about. Trump already put out an executive order saying loophole closed. Just because you pop out a child, just because you drop a litter here in the U.S. when you're here illegally, does not mean your child automatically becomes a citizen. But the judge doesn't want anyone to see it that way, and so that's why it's being framed this way. Anyway, NBC News goes on to write, the chief judge in the U.S. District Court for the Western District of Louisiana was appointed by President Donald Trump in 2017 and confirmed by the Senate the next year. The mother and her 2 daughters, including the U.S. citizen who is identified as VML, in court documents, was seized Tuesday morning in New Orleans because they were here illegally by ICE as the woman went to a scheduled meeting with an agency lawyers opposing the deportation wrote. The family was checking in with an intensive supervision appearance program office, the attorneys wrote. The mother from Honduras had been freed from ICE detention back in 2021 under President Vegetables, aka Joe Biden, under that same very program. The father of VML, who lives in the U.S., notice how they don't say whether or not he's a citizen, sought custody of this VML girl after the mother was detained this week and asked that the girl be placed with a custodian, meaning not him, who is ready and willing to care for her in the U.S., probably because he's not a citizen, my guess, and that this custodian would be a citizen. Now, VML was born in Baton Rouge on January 4th of 2023 and is a U.S. citizen. The attorneys with the National Immigration Project of the National Lawyers Guild wrote, I disagree. The other child is 11 years old and was born in Honduras, meaning an illegal alien child. Attorneys who sought to stop the child's deportation argued that removing her violates the Constitution and her rights as a U.S. citizen, even though the 14th Amendment was never designed for this sort of nonsense. Lawyers for the government said that the child's mother has a legal custody of the child and that she is indicated in a letter that she would take her daughters to Honduras. The letter in Spanish reads, "I will take my daughter with me to Honduras." An image of the handwritten letter is dated Thursday at 6:23 p.m. when the woman and child were in ICE custody and before they were deported Friday. This is straight up misinformation from the media. And this judge is complicit in this. This so-called citizen, this 2-year-old girl, is nothing more than a child born to an illegal alien who was here illegally in the U.S. And had she been properly deported, this 2-year-old girl would never have been born in the U.S. to begin with. Now, what they're trying to use here is the 14th Amendment, the perversion of the 14th Amendment, rather, which was designed originally to protect the black community, specifically former slaves or freedmen, by Abraham Lincoln, the father of the Republican Party. And after the Civil War, the black community was being persecuted by the Democrat Party, who was hell-bent on making them miserable for as punishment for having lost the Civil War. There was a desperate attempt to delegitimize the free slaves as true Americans. This is where you got black codes to segregate and restrict the black man's rights here in the U.S. So thank you, Democrat Party. The 14th Amendment then was designed and created to put a stop to all of this garbage. But later on, it was perverted in 1982 to also apply to illegal aliens, which created an incentive program for criminal-minded people to break into the country for the explicit purpose of popping out children so they could have a way into the country. This is how this whole madness really got going. This is why we ended up with amnesty in 1986 to try and solve the problem. But of course, it only made it worse. So this is where anchor babies come from. And Donald Trump is putting this whole 14th Amendment perversion to the test. In case you forgot, he has already created an executive order that effectively ended birthright citizenship, the whole loophole. The whole point of the executive order was to say, nope, this 2-year-old child is not a U.S. citizen because the mother and likely the father are not. This is what the whole challenge is really all about. See, all of this stems from the 14th Amendment, which reads in part that persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. And the administration is arguing, and in my opinion is rightfully contending, that this would obviously exclude children of aliens or temporary visa holders, as their parents would owe their allegiance to whatever foreign country that they came from. And so they would not be fully under U.S. jurisdiction, obviously. And when we take into context, again, the original design of the 14th Amendment created explicitly for former slaves, then we understand what the grift is really all about here. It's a sneak way to get people into this country to eventually get mass amnesty. That is the purpose. That is the goal. Which is why the story by the mainstream media, and specifically here in this case, NBC News, with their headline that a 2-year-old citizen was apparently deported, it is trying to create a narrative. By calling this child a citizen, the intent is to remove any doubt from the reader, from the consumer of their news rag, of the child's status as a U.S. citizen, both for the reasons of protecting the anchor baby machine, as well as to create the fear machine, the juicy narrative that they so desperately want, that the U.S. government under Trump will come for true citizens and remove them all, meaning that you will someday be deported. Because if they can deport this poor innocent 2-year-old, then surely they'll come for, Rosie O'Donnell or something. So, all of this, of course, is utter nonsense, but that is what they are trying desperately to gin up with the American people. They are trying to create fear. Now, as far as Trump's executive order goes, it was, of course, immediately blocked by court judges all over the U.S., and it continues to wind its way up the courts in appeals. But this is mission critical for the White House right now, their plan for mass deportation. Removing illegals and their entire illegal families is crucial and critical for getting rid of the illegal alien population long term. We can never be free of the criminal alien until they can all be removed. And that is the real reason why the left is fighting this tooth and nail. Their dreams of having millions of new non-citizens to become voters is at stake. And as an aside, I did some digging before I did this episode today, before I did this show today. I tried to see if I could find out whether or not the father was actually a U.S. citizen. And wouldn't you know it, who he is carefully being hidden here. The reports I've read show that ICE not only refused to let this illegal child be handed over to the father's sister-in-law, who was supposed to be the one she was going to stay with, but also threatened to detain the father himself if he tried to pick up his daughter. This was according to a CNN article I read, which to me, this screams of a likely non-citizen. Because how else would ICE detain the father? Now, the person who was supposed to take over caring for the child was the father's sister-in-law. She was supposed to be the guardian. And she, from reports I'm reading, is confirmed to be a U.S. citizen, which makes it seem likely that the father is part of a mixed immigration status family. Because trust me on this, if the dad was an actual U.S. citizen, this would be front page news everywhere. So, I'll just leave it at that. The bottom line here, my friends, this is a shot across the bow from the Trump administration. They are intent on ending this whole automatic citizenship garbage for illegal aliens. And so the battle is reaching this next stage of fevered pitch here. Don't forget, Holman was explicitly clear on their intentions.
We have seen one estimate that says it would cost $88 billion to deport 1 million people a year.
I don't know if that's accurate or not.
Is that what American taxpayers should expect?
What price do you put on national security? Is it worth it?
Is there a way to carry out mass deportation without separating families?
Of course there is. Families can be deported together.
Now, the media, of course, doesn't want you to think too hard about all of this, and that's why you're getting the lines of citizen deported. Again, it is all a desperate attempt to frame the debate over whether the Trump administration can deport a citizen, rather than the real debate, which is whether illegals sneaking into this country can pop out children here and have their children become automatic U.S. citizens. That is the true battle that is going on here, and the country's future is what's at stake.